have a really weird question for you. If I said 22-0, would that mean something to you? So let's see, rugby union fans, put up your hands. Okay, and rugby league? I'm disappointed. So the 22-0 is really the Springboks snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. I mean, actually, it was the opposite. And it was very disappointing. So when we talk about the trends and operational excellence, I also want to make sure that we don't end up in that position where we snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. So I want you to remember 3 words at the end of the session, just 3. So let's write them down now so that at the end we can recap and I'll see whether you paid attention. So the first one is smarter. The second one is faster, and the third one is resilient. And that applies whether you are electricity, water, or gas. So let's just check. If you're with electricity, put your hands up. Okay, water? Going to be dry. Gas? We're going to do fuel switching. Now, I've had a really, really tough year with my utility services. And I'm going to tell you that story because I want you to understand my experience of a lack of resilience. It all started off in January, UK, midwinter, and the gas boiler gave up. And if you understand UK houses, that meant it was bloody cold. And it was expensive, and I was upset because it was so expensive, and I blamed my gas supplier because, it was the gas boiler. But actually, it was my appliance, the device beyond the meter. And then to add insult to injury, in February, there was a water leak, about 2,000 liters per hour on my supply circuit. And we had a big fight with the utility. And yes, I used a generative AI tool to write a little letter to explain how annoyed I was. And the issue was we couldn't decide who owned the pipes. My local water company, and I won't say who it was, didn't understand that it was their infrastructure. And it was convenient for them to say, hey, it's yours. We think the leak is on your property. And I was going, hey, it's in the street outside underneath the cycle path. It's not my problem. And we went backwards and forwards for about 6 weeks before accidentally I found an old guy, older than me, not by much. And I said to him, you work for this company? And he said, oh, yeah, I know about you. You've been writing those letters. Let me come and visit you. So he came and visited, and we walked down the line, and he said, I know what's happened here, and it got fixed. That's exactly the example of not smart, not fast, not resilient. So the more things change, the more they stay the same. So let's check. How many of you have got rooftop solar? Put your hands up. Almost a majority. No, not quite. Keep your hands up if you've got solar. Yeah, actually going towards the majority. Do you have electric vehicles? Hands up. Still got a way for that energy transition. And how many of you are harvesting rainwater? Okay, quite a few. What have I just described? I've described activities beyond the meter, driven by technology that are changing how your business model is going to work into the future. So when we think of our utility business model, we introduced this idea last year. We said, what's happening in the asset base that allows us to serve our customers? But our customers are starting to buy assets that are changing our asset base. So the idea that I own all my assets, I control my assets to deliver resilient services is false, because I serve my customers through the market. And some of you are going to say, whoa, I don't have a market. I've got flat rate water tariffs. And that is a form of a market. And we see markets evolving. We're going away from this idea of centralized markets served by very large, big asset bases, all the way across to decentralized markets served by distributed assets. So we can see the market shifting. And as the market changes, so our definition of operational excellence is going to change. Now, when we think about operational excellence, we've got to say, well, what does that mean for our business? How does our business serve those customers? And we're going to talk about just 3 business trends very briefly, and then I'm going to switch and focus in on 3 technology trends. So 3 business trends that I want you to think about is, when it comes to customer service, we're going to change. And we're going to stop the nonsense of deflection. And we're going to move to engagement. Now, you might feel a little bit offended, but that was my experience with my water company. I was being deflected. Please go and self-serve. Don't hassle us. It's not our problem. We've got all these chatbot thingies there that sort of deflect and keep you vaguely misdirected and unhappy. If they had engaged me, we probably would have got to a solution much faster. That means we've got to change how I interact with my customer, and I become driven by my customer. Notice I didn't use the word consumer. I said customer. Customers have choice because of the change in technology beyond the meter. So what happens with the world of asset? It's going to get scary. And we've been talking about IT-OT integration since I can remember. I can remember as a Gartner customer reading a story about IT-OT integration in 2004. That was a long time ago. But we're now at the point where not only are we talking about IT-OT integration, we've got to stop this nonsense of talking about IT security and OT security. We need to grow up, and we need to start to talk about cyber-physical security. Why? Because those devices that the customers are buying do have configuration, and they can change their behavior. And because customers' assets are changing by themselves, I need to be able to interface with them, manage them, control them, and protect them. I've got to do that through some form of mechanism. But we also know that those forms of threats are evolving. And that means we've got to think quite carefully about how do we deal with cyber-physical security. And I'm not the expert in this world. If you want to have a call on that topic, speak to my colleague Joanne. She's a guru. Me, I just know enough to say, that's enough, let me shut up now. And when we think of markets, we want to talk about the shape and the force of flexibility on the system. So flexibility is going to force a fundamental new mode of operating the system. And that's going to be very, very challenging. It's going to change our understanding of operational excellence. And that means we need to solve those problems. And these 3 problems are actually relatively straightforward because there are technologies, there are systems that you can put into your budget plan, you can buy, you can invest, and problem solved. The harder problem is actually on the intersections of those 3 circles. And let's drill into those. When we think about our infrastructure, I want you to think about how do we become smarter. We need to kill off latency, and that we can only do with being smarter about how we connect those devices. If I have got those signals, that time series data, and I can find those events, then I can start to think about how to make faster decisions. That means I'm using all of those events, consuming them in some form of digital twin, and running simulations a lot faster than we used to. So the idea that every engineer has his own model and his own preferential simulation tool is dead. Because everybody in this room, and I mean everybody in this room, has got a model management problem. You are going to fail in simulation because of the engineer's model proliferation addiction. So you're going to have to change that. And if we change that, we're going to be able to deploy AI at scale and use that machine muscle to manage all of those assets and orchestrate them in a way that we can achieve operational resilience. Now, that is a big question. What does operational excellence really look like? Now, I've got a confession to make. That is a very big number. And I never achieved 98% for anything, apart from failures. So as a kid, could I get 98% in an exam? Absolutely not. As a student, never, ever. So is 98% good enough for how to operate the system? Is 98% good enough for how we deliver our commodities? And the hard answer is we don't know. And this is the exam question you need to answer. What is good enough? Or is it 5 nines? There's a huge cost curve from 98 to 5 nines. Now, when we think of operational excellence, I haven't spoken to a single client who said to me, I don't have a problem with aging assets. Everybody's got aging assets. If I go to your physical infrastructure, you've got aging assets. If I go to your operational technology, most of that kit is more than 9, 10 years old and should be replaced and upgraded. If we drill in, we find rising customer expectations. So what I didn't tell you was that, horror, I've had 3 outages on my supply circuit in the last 6 months. 3! Now, I know I'm a South African, and I should be used to power outages, but we've been in the UK for 8 years, and I've been spoiled, and so my expectations have risen. The idea of being out is just not on. And on top of this, we see very complex markets emerging because we see the financialization of everything. So when you talk to electricity retailers or you talk to retailers of anything, they would tell you that the world of products is becoming very complex and is changing faster. Hands up if you've got an old system that starts with an E and ends with a C. A big blue logo. That system is very brittle and doesn't allow you to configure rapid product changes. But we're going to have to do that because of the rapidly changing markets that we find. And then if we think about all those assets that customers are starting to buy and operate, we want to control and manage them, but we can't because we've got this old stranded protocol base, and now you want to add OPC and some other protocols like Modbus, and you're going, well, how do I do this? Because all of these are stranded in islands. Add to that this thing of adverse weather and how we've got adverse weather impacting asset availability. Then add to this the whole problem of a manual coordination because a lot of the last mile is still not instrumented or digitalized, and we've still got to send a man in a van or a lady in a van to go fix it, and then add a whole lot of other issues into this mix. And now we come back to the question of what is operational excellence. And unfortunately, when we say 98%, some of you are going to say that means 98% of the people do time and attendance well. That's not operational excellence. If we were to say 98% of the people do the job right the first time, that's not operational excellence. If we say 98% in time, means that your average customer is going to be very upset with you because that means I'm out for at least 7 days in a year. So as IT professionals, the bar is much, much higher than 98%. So we need to get somewhere near 5 nines. So we're going to have to make some investments to be able to achieve this. And you're going to have to think about how do we become smarter with our intelligent infrastructure, how we connect and measure and observe events. We're going to have to pay attention to how we take all of that data, bring it back, and make decisions at scale and at speed, and then finally use that so that we can deliver business capabilities that are driven by machine muscle. Now, what that means is that you can use AI everywhere across your business. Would I do it today? The pragmatic, honest answer is absolutely not. Because I don't trust the models, I don't trust the data, and actually I prefer using people. And in that keynote this morning, you saw that tension between people being ready and your AI being ready, your infrastructure being ready. And these 3 steps set out the infrastructure investments that you need to make to get ready. So let's drill in a little bit into what does smarter, intelligent infrastructure really mean and look like. And the shortest definition is assets that think, predict, and act. Did you hear what I said? Assets that think, predict, and act. If they think, they must be able to sense. Because if I can't sense, there's nothing to worry about. So to be able to think, I must be able to sense. If I want to predict, then I need to be able to reason. And I use models to do that reasoning. And then I want to act because this asset needs to dispatch itself. So that's a big shift from the world of today, where a human in the loop might supervise some of this, to a human on the loop watching all of this happen. So why is this important? We've got a strategic prediction. We think that if everybody is smarter and we've got that intelligent infrastructure, we think that we will cut outages by about 40%. That's a big, big gain. And that means we're going to move from reactive to predictive. And we can see that happening to maintenance, we can see that happening to operations, we can see that in customers, we can see that in markets. It's going to happen across the board. So where are we right now? Yes. If we ask, you'll see the data says it's a little bit poor. About 31% of the people in this room, because this is a power and utilities research panel, say that they've done something about addressing the need for real-time data across the asset base. How are they doing it? Well, I'm doing RTU upgrades, which is really interesting because I'm not going to serve the future and meet the future by repeating the past. And we would make this position statement that you actually need to go back and say to your OT teams, we're not doing RTU upgrades anymore. We're actually going to move to an edge gateway infrastructure because that edge gateway is going to make us resilient into the future because I can then host things like AI at the edge. I can consume that data, process that data at the edge. But instead, what we're hearing from our customers is around about 1 in 3 are busy upgrading the RTUs, so replacing the old with the old new. And that doesn't really make sense. Why is this important? If you make that change, you are repositioning yourself to take action and progress towards that intelligent infrastructure. Then you will be able to predict, you'll be able to prevent, and in due course prescribe. Is anyone here from Meridian? Because Meridian is a great example of a utility who's taken this to heart and is doing it well. So they had a look and they said, we've got all of this asset data and we just can't turn it into real insight. And so they deployed a cloud-based AI platform in partnership with Fujitsu, let's acknowledge, and they did some advanced analytics. And I want you to understand that advanced analytics is the foundation that's preparing for that future. Have they delivered real business results? Yeah, they've slashed the downtime, and they've cut their costs and improved the cross-team collaboration. But they're not the only example. If we go to the US, Evergy had a look across their asset base, and they said, you know what we need? We need our own private LTE network so that we can solve this connectivity problem once and for all. If we go to Southern California Edison, they had a look and said, you know what we really need? We actually need sensors on every pole that sense the 5 physical sensors. Really interesting approach. They said, we don't want to measure VNI, that's too expensive. But if we measure vibrations and temperature and use all 5 sensors, we can actually infer what is abnormal because we'll learn what is normal. Very interesting. So if you're interested, Google Gridway. Very interesting, different approach. National Grid in the UK said, we've got a problem. We've got over 40 different systems that are sensing and fetching and retrieving data from the field. And it's very hard to consolidate. So they put a chat engine in front of it. Great pragmatic solution. First step, just connect. Go and connect all those siloed IT, OT assets and put in place that data fabric. That's the first step to smart. Now we go into the world of fast. And in the fast world, we want decisions at speed. So we don't want latency in the data acquisition, and we don't want latency in the decisions. And if you ask me to do something, my wife will tell you, it takes forever, because he's got to understand all the opportunities, all the pros, all the cons, and it takes him a while to work it out. And then it's inconsistent because it's not repeatable, because he likes to play with the alternatives. So this is the world of simulation. And we spoke about the problem that we've got with models. So when we want to make decisions at speed, we think you're going to slash those outage recovery times. But what are we seeing with our clients? When it comes to data and investments in data on decisions, we see about 11% of the IT budget being spent on fetching data. It's a good thing. But it's really interesting that it's consuming so much of the IT budget. If we ask the question around IT-OT integration, we find about 9% of the IT budget is being spent on IT-OT integration. And then if we ask about decisions, well, we're only spending about 7% of the budget on decisions. And that means that we're wasting opportunity and we're leaving value on the table. And then what do I do on that side of the fence in business? Look at IT, squandering all this money, burning cash, not delivering the outcomes that I need. What do you really need to do? You need to take action and make sure that your business processes define all the decision points that you do not have clearly clarified today. Because if you don't know what the decision is, you don't need data. If you don't know what the decision is, you don't need to worry about risk. If you don't know what the decision is, you don't have an automation issue. But the rest of the business is saying, hey, IT, AI guys, come to the table, bring that automation to the front. So you have to take some steps. Is anyone here from Stanwell? Thank you. We're going to come talk to you afterwards, and we're going to talk to you about your energy modeling platform. Why is this so interesting? Well, I wanted to do better forecasting of customers. I wanted to be able to forecast revenue so that I could forecast investments. Do you see how that simulation use case stacks up? And all of you have got this opportunity if you work through those decision architectures and you say, which decisions do we need to actually document so that we can improve how we simulate? So there are a lot of other use cases that are available. If you track the Ion innovations, we'll be announcing some winners in the next couple of weeks. Pay attention, track them, and see what's going on. Where do we get to? We've done smart, we've done fast, and in fast, we just want to open up the opportunity to simulate, because if I simulate those decisions, we're going to be able to dispatch those resources. Now, when it comes to the world of resilience with machine muscle, I'm not an athlete. I don't know why. If you just look at this figure, you can recognize I'm a high-performance triathlon athlete. But tying aside, we know that machine muscle and muscle memory is actually the heart of how our bodies work as humans. Yet in our organizations, we don't have very good muscle memory because we're not clear about the decisions and we're not clear about how we automate those decisions. And we think by 2030, AI is going to manage most of the real-time orchestration use cases. So what does that mean? Operational excellence is going to be in AI in the control room, dispatching and managing assets in the field. Now, you might think about that for a moment and you're going to get sweaty palms, which is good, because you're saying, I don't know the decisions. I don't know the risk tolerance. I don't know the data quality. Those are all actions that you need to take. When we drilled into the state of the art at the moment, most of our utilities on that research panel came back and said, well, we're still busy building our AI strategy. And you know what? We're going to use the AI embedded in our vendor products. And that's a bit sad, because what vendors are trying to tell you is, I'm only delivering automation for single tasks at the moment, so I'm only on that bottom left-hand corner. Meanwhile, your executive team has ambitions out here about wonderful autonomous AI that is distributed across your operational territory, managing operations in real time. That's the vision that they've got, but maybe they're not communicating it. That's really tough. Do we have clients who've started this journey? So in the UK, we've got a huge problem with water companies pumping sewage into the rivers. One of them, Southern Water, said, yeah, we don't want to pay that kind of fine anymore. And they started to embed AI across their operations to track and forecast when those overflows were likely to occur. Consequently, they've been able to slash those combined sewage overflows by about 34%. They've still got a long way to go, but their performance is streets ahead of the other water companies, and no, this is not my supplier. So when we think about this, we're going to have to govern how we deploy AI into the field and how we're going to revoke decision-making rights to those machines, because we're going to have to manage them to deploy that muscle memory. Now, in that same research panel, we asked our utilities how much of the budget they were spending on data quality and on AI. And the results were kind of shocking. Around about 1% of the budget is being spent, 1% of the IT budget is being spent on data quality. And just under 1% is being spent on AI model development. Remember the point that I made earlier on. I said, if you want to be smarter, faster, resilient, we've got to get on top of the model problem. And you're not going to get on top of the model problem if we're spending so low. So we're going to have to up that budget. So when we think of the key technology trends, we want to have this conversation about how do you go from being passive to being smarter? What's it going to change? It's going to change how we manage resource availability. If we want to think about how do we make decisions, we're going to move from slow resource management decisions to fast resource management decisions. If we want to think about resilience, we're going to move from a brittle infrastructure to an agile, resilient infrastructure. But that means that we're going to have a look at our budgets, and we're going to have to change that 2% spending level and increase it significantly. You're not going to meet the future by spending 98% of your IT budget on the problems of yesterday. But that is what we're doing at the moment, and that's what we observe. So when you think of the three trends that we spoke about in terms of technology and the three trends that we spoke of in business, you'll see that they're kind of juxtaposed against each other. They're in tension with each other. Because smarter, intelligent infrastructure is going to expose you to more cyber-physical threats, just because the attack surface is increasing. If we think about faster decisions, we're going to have to make those faster decisions in the context of a market that is becoming more complex, with more participants, a wider ecosystem. And when we think about that machine muscle, we're going to have to engage customers and engage machines beyond the boundary of the meter. But what do we know as utilities? We're very, very reluctant to go beyond the meter. But that is what is changing and changing our business model. Those investments that customers are making beyond the edge are changing our business model, and you have to be prepared and ready to respond to that. Now, of course, you're going to say, but you don't understand, Lloyd, I've got technical debt, and that's why I'm spending so much of my budget, because I'm dealing with technical debt. Please come to tomorrow's session, and we'll explore how you can use paid to manage some of that technical debt. Thank you so much for your attention.